Here is a question no one can actually answer. Are you real? Like, are you actually real? Not your name, not your memories, not the story you tell about yourself. The actual experience happening right now, the weight of your body in the chair, the air entering your lungs. Is any of that truly happening? Or is something else producing the feeling that it is? You cannot check. There's no test you can run from inside the experience to know for certain. That is the part that should unsettle you a little. Because if you cannot tell the difference between real and simulated from where you are standing, what does real even mean? Try to prove you are real right now. Go ahead. Take your time. Most people never actually try. They live their whole life without ever once stopping to ask it seriously. You just did. That alone puts you ahead of most people who will ever watch a video like this. There is an idea in modern science that takes this question seriously. It is called the simulation hypothesis. The idea is simple to say and strange to actually sit with. What if the world you experience is not the base layer of reality? What if it is being generated by something underneath it? The same way a video game generates a world for a player without the player needing to see the code underneath it. The player just sees trees and sky and ground. The hypothesis asks whether your entire life could work the same way, just a far more advanced version of it. This idea was first laid out seriously by a philosopher named Nick Bostrom in 2003. His argument was not that we definitely are in a simulation. It was that, logically, one of three things has to be true. Either civilizations like ours always destroy themselves before they get advanced enough to build a simulation, or they survive, but they choose never to build one. Or they do build one, and if they do, simulated people would vastly outnumber real ones, which would mean that statistically, you would be more likely to be one of the simulated ones. That is the entire argument. Not proof, just logic. But the idea did not stay in philosophy departments for long. Physicists started asking a slightly different version of the same question. Not whether someone built a simulation on purpose, but whether the universe itself behaves like something computational at its core. That distinction matters more than it sounds like it should, because it moved the question out of philosophy and into something you can actually measure. Before we go further, if you had to guess right now, gut feeling only, do you think reality is real or generated? Drop your honest guess, then let's keep going. Because the case for the simulation hypothesis is stranger than most people expect. So let's start with the case against it. Because there is a real, serious, scientific objection to this idea. It has nothing to do with philosophy. It has to do with energy. Simulating something this detailed would require an almost unimaginable amount of computing power. Think about everything that would need to be tracked. Every leaf on every tree. Every grain of sand on every beach. Every thought inside every human brain on the planet, all at once, in real time. And that is just Earth, not the rest of the solar system, not the galaxy, just the part you happen to be standing on. If reality is a simulation, this is apparently the part worth rendering in the most detail, which is either a strange coincidence or a clue that this whole idea has a flaw in it somewhere. Vazza's calculation does not just apply to a perfect, high-resolution simulation either. He also tested what would happen with a much lower resolution version, a rougher approximation of Earth. Even that version would require more energy than every star in every galaxy we can currently observe. There was no version of this he could make the numbers work for. One scientist actually sat down and did the math on this, an astrophysicist named Franco Vazza in 2025. He calculated how much energy it would take to simulate something as simple as Earth, down to the smallest physical scale, not a rough approximation. Down to the smallest physical unit that exists. His conclusion: it would take more energy than exists in a cluster of 100,000 stars. Convert it entirely into pure energy. Not theoretically difficult, physically impossible, given the laws of energy we currently understand. That is a serious scientific argument against the simulation hypothesis. It is not a feeling, it is a calculation. And for a while, that should have settled the question. It did not. Think about how little of your day you actually choose to notice. Most of what reaches your senses gets quietly ignored before it ever becomes a thought. You are, right now, only aware of a tiny fraction of what is actually happening around you. That is not a flaw. It is simply how attention works. But it does mean the version of reality in your head was always a reconstruction, never the whole picture, just a usable one. Whether that reconstruction is happening in a brain made of neurons, or a system made of something else entirely, may not be the part that matters most. Here is where it gets uncomfortable. Because physics has been quietly hinting at something strange for a long time. At the smallest possible scale, the universe does not behave like a smooth, continuous thing. It behaves like it is made of small, discrete units, almost like pixels. Some physicists call this the Planck scale, the smallest unit of distance that seems to mean anything at all. Below that point, distance itself seems to stop making sense. That is exactly what you would expect to find if reality had a resolution limit. The same way a video game has a resolution limit, there is also the matter of how information seems to behave. Physicists have found that the amount of information something can hold depends on its surface area, not its volume, which is strange. That is not how solid objects are supposed to work. It is exactly how a hologram works. A flat surface containing enough information to project a three-dimensional experience. Some physicists take this seriously enough to call it the holographic principle. None of this proves we are in a simulation, but it means the universe behaves a little too much like something built, rather than something that simply is. That tension is the entire reason this question has not gone away. Two real, separate observations about how the universe behaves, both pointing in the same uncomfortable direction. There's a third observation worth knowing about, even though it gets less attention. It involves how particles behave when nobody is measuring them. At the smallest scale, particles do not seem to have a fixed location until something interacts with them. Almost like the universe is only rendering the details when they are actually needed. The same way a video game only fully renders the part of the map the player can actually see. This is one of the strangest, best documented findings in modern physics. And nobody fully agrees on why it happens. Three separate observations, none of them proof. All of them strange in the same direction. Quick question, if it turned out tomorrow that this really is a simulation, would anything about how you live today actually change? Sit with that for a second. Then let's finish this properly. So let's say, for a moment, that none of this can actually be settled. What does that actually change about your life right now? Here's the strange part. Almost nothing. Your coffee would still taste like coffee. Your favorite song would still move you. The people you love would still feel exactly as real to you as they do right now. Because your experience would not change. Only the explanation underneath it would. Think about a memory you have from years ago. Something that felt completely real while it was happening. You cannot go back and verify it the way you could check something happening right now. And yet you do not walk around doubting that your past happened. You trust the experience of it even without proof. Which means you already know how to live with an unanswerable question. You have been doing it your entire life without realizing it had a name. This is actually where a real philosophical disagreement comes in. Some thinkers argue that even if this is a simulation, it would not make your life any less real. Their reasoning is simple. The information and the structure running the simulation would still be physically real somewhere. So your joy, your pain, your memories, they would still be happening, just made of something different than you assumed. Other thinkers push back on that completely. They argue that something about direct physical, biological reality cannot be replaced by information alone. That a feeling generated by code is not the same thing as a feeling generated by a living body. Neither side has settled this. And maybe that disagreement says something important on its own. Here is the deeper point. Serious scientists do not spend years studying an idea this strange for no reason. They study it because it forces a more useful question into the open. Not whether this is a simulation, but how much of what you call real is actually just the part you happen to be able to perceive. Your eyes only detect a small slice of the light that actually exists. Your ears only detect a narrow range of the sound that actually exists. Your brain fills in enormous gaps without ever telling you it is doing so. You already live inside a version of reality that has been filtered, compressed, and quietly edited before it ever reaches your conscious awareness. Whether that filtering happens through evolution or through code might matter less than you think. The actual experience would still be the same shape, a narrowed, filtered, incomplete slice of something much larger than you can directly access. That is true whether or not anyone ever proves the simulation hypothesis correct, which is maybe the most honest thing anyone can say about this entire question. Last one before we close. Has anything about how this feels actually changed since the start of this video? Tell me honestly, then let's bring this home. So, are you real? Nobody can fully answer that. Not Vazza, not anyone studying this seriously. What you do know is that the experience itself, whatever produces it, is the only thing you will ever actually have access to. So maybe the more useful question is not whether it is real, but what you are going to do with the time you experience inside it. That question, at least, has an answer, and it is one only you get to give. Not a physicist, not a philosopher, you. Whatever this is, you are the one actually living it. If this changed how you think about your own reality, even slightly, that is worth sharing with someone else. Subscribe to Avum. We ask the questions you stopped asking a long time ago.